Well, thanks for the very interesting question, and of course the assertions that are made by 𝒕𝒐𝒓 speak to a number of very concerning developments, so to speak. The insidious threat that goonism causes, especially with the normalization of goonism or wanton destruction and even death, coercion, and intimidation, is something that's dangerous. And I mean, yes, I highlighted some of the examples here, that when we simplify some of these weighty issues and then normalize them and rationalize them, eventually obviously normalizing them, then it becomes a danger. The very fact that crime seems to pay, and the bigger the crime, it pays more. And of course, based on the altar or political sanctification of that criminality, or those acts of criminality, the bedmates that goonism and the political enterprise is really dangerous, because politics and the political element of national power, if you looked at the whole sum total of the elements of national power, is really one of the defining elements of power. What 𝒕𝒐𝒓 has also said in terms of the political elements being elected and the people who show up and beat people up in funerals, is spoken of a monkey essentially. And you cannot elect that monkey without being one, as it said. So the electorate need a lot of, and of course, to him that much is given, much is expected. Yes, we have to judge these things based on who then has the biggest responsibility and who then has their back, being the ultimate stopper. It is people who have the ultimate responsibility, and so getting to whip them into order has a lot of things than just calling them out. It is the strengthening of the institutions that have got to actually bite. Electoral reforms, and I think the jury is still out on how much we have in terms of just laws and regulations. We have an overkill of them, but the operationalization of the same is where we actually stuck in the mud. So strengthening of these institutions beyond just electoral reforms, we have institutions such as the NCS, we have the NCIC, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, seem not to, beyond the educational perspective and the mediation, they should actually be having the power to actually just, grab people, take them before the arc of justice, and get people to be set, a date for in the prisons that we have. I mean, we have far too many as well. So if you look at the architecture that this goonism is growing on, and the ecosystem and the field that really just does inspire this, and the question that you just did ask as well at the beginning, it may seem very, very rational, but the rationalization of the same is actually stuck in some of the research elements that have been done. In 1982, we had a gentleman, 𝒔 that did, come up with a framework that did talk about a vast array of elements of psychological research, and most of which are really just having their bed in Project Kenya. Mm-hmm. If you talk about the instigators of acts of aggression, so the sum total of internal motivations, there are far too many. The motivations in terms of money, we talked about the population that's unemployed, underemployed, and that do not have the sense of hope anymore. And anything that then does come in terms of a dominant aspiration, because where we socialize as a country, for you to make it, then you go to be actually having a good family with feed sense, school, the normal things, beyond just the basic needs. Drive a big car. These internal motivators in terms of just the money, and of course the lack of fear of the consequences that exist, that anything goes, the impunity that seems to be run away, seems to benefit people with that internal motivation. The second factor is habit strength factors, which of course the sum total of things that you learn out of reward and observation. So habit strength factors, they do exist. If you look at the people that is highlighted, the monkeys that essentially are beating people in funerals and things like that, we're talking about people who are hot-wired. The whole development of human beings mean that we are going through what you call the cold circuitry. Hot circuit is where you have wild animals that will do crazy things in the spur of the moment. Now, cold circuit doesn't seem to exist in the humans that are being defined here. So the habit strength factors exist. Now, the stimuli in the external environment that seem to facilitate acts of criminality and aggression seem to also exist, an overkill of them. Now, if you look at that, you add those three, the stimuli that facilitate rather than the inhibitions and the stimuli that inhibit acts of aggression, then you arrive at the algebra of aggression as put by...
And Byron, that description actually gives us the characteristics of the goons.
Yes, absolutely.
But now let's look at the demographic.
Yeah.
We are talking about the youth who are